Well, welcome back to the channel. Uh, Glad you could be with us again today. Today, I'd like to talk about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and that is engineering principles that are found in nature. Uh, I'm a biology teacher by trade, but the last 8 or 10 years of my teaching career, I was also teaching robotics and engineering and how it related to biology. And so this is a topic that's kind of interesting to me, and I hope you find it interesting to you as well. Now, remember, we're talking about origins, which is always causes debate no matter where you bring it up or what kind of crowd you're in. You usually can find someone on a couple different sides of this debate. And remember what we're talking about. Our approach to this whole thing is a scientific one. Since evolution takes so long, according to evolutionists, millions or billions of years, nobody can really observe it, the whole process at once. And also, if you're a creationist, well, creation happened and the only person there was to see it was God. So you can't study this in the usual, like, scientific way, like observable and repeatable thing, because it's a historical event. But you can still study it scientifically. And so we use this model evidence approach. We've got two models that kind of describe origins. There's the evolutionary model, which is kind of a mechanistic model, or a thing by chance. Natural selection occurred by chance. We got different mutations, and natural selection either wiped them out, or maybe if they were beneficial, kept them. And over a period of millions or billions of years, then what you did was you got animals evolving from one kind to another, and of course all that came from an inanimate world. Now, if you're on the intelligent design side, then you're saying that it was all basically created or made. There was some kind of designer behind it, and so those are the two basic models. And I suppose you could have a combination of those two, but if you found evidence that supported this one, you'd probably go here. If you found evidence that supported this one, you'd probably go here. There's no real need, because they're very opposite in what they predict. And so probably you're going to find evidence one way or the other. And that's what we're attempting to do. We're attempting to look at the scientific data that we see in the world today, things that you can observe and feel and touch and experiment on. And we're trying to figure out which of these models best describes the origin of life and the origin of the things that we have today. Now, I'm going to give some credits here today, because most of this stuff I've just learned recently by this article by Stuart Burgess. It was called Bioinspiration and Biomimetics, and it was in that magazine, and it was a review of linkage mechanisms in animal joints and bio-inspired designs. Uh, Pretty interesting article, has some really interesting things in it. Now, who's Stuart Burgess? Well, he is a really famous engineer. He's had, just numerous articles. I mean, I think it's like, 30 articles published in scientific engineering magazines and stuff like that. His most recent award, he's got a lot of awards. His most recent award was the 2019 James Clayton Prize. And the reason why he got that basically was two different big things that he's done. First of all, he's worked on all four of the European Space Agency's major Earth observation satellites. He's developed at least one or two subsystems that were used in all of those particular satellites, which is a pretty amazing thing, because that's over many, many years. And then his most recent thing was his research at Bristol University. He was the team leader on the Team Great Britain's Olympic bicycle design, which at the Tokyo Olympics actually won. They won the sprint and had the fastest design, mechanical design, engineering thing that he designed. So this guy knows what he's doing. He's a pretty interesting dude, and I would highly recommend you read this article that we just referred to. Now, what we're going to do today is talk about three aspects of what we would consider complex engineering. Okay. First of all, engineering, especially if it's complex engineering things that have been designed that carry on complex features or complex applications. First of all, usually you'll have multiple layers and systems in a complex engineering design. Secondly, you'll have some type of complex linkage mechanisms to link like systems together and things like that. And then the third thing is you'll usually have complex control systems. If you have those three things, you have a very complex engineering system. And these are not easy to make. Some people work, years and years and years to get certain systems to have, they work on all of these layers and all of these linkage mechanisms and all these control systems in order to get something to work. So we're going to take a look at those three things. Now, the first one we wanted to look at is just this whole idea of multiple layers and systems in engineering principles. Now, I don't know what you think of when you think of engineering. Uh, here's what I think of when I think of like engineering a car. So here's a whole bunch of parts here. I think these are the parts to the engine. There's an engine block, and there's some pistons and some linkage things, and you've got seals and all that kind of stuff. You have all these different parts. And then, of course, you have you have an engine that's all put together. All these different parts go together into a thing, and you have a brake system, which is a subsystem. You have all these other subsystems here as well. You've got fuel cells and or fuel lines and things. And of course, somebody had to design all that to begin with. They had an overall view of that. And that overall view then got turned into all these things, which eventually get turned into a car. Now, I would say that, if I asked you, okay, if I just took all these parts and I just threw them out someplace, uh, you know, could they end up becoming a car by design or by chance? And you would all say, well, yeah, you'd really probably have to have a design to make this happen. Things just don't go together by chance. Now, here's these views in a little bit more verbal way. Um, first of all, you have this assembly view. Any system that you have has parts. So, a car has the chassis, it has the engine, it has the gearbox, the wheels, and there's all kinds of parts, just tons and tons of different types of parts. And that's one way of viewing a system. But there's another view called a systems view. Now that would be like fuel subsystems, or you have the engine subsystem, or you have the cooling system in a car. You have these different pieces and parts that work together in order to carry on a particular function. So not only do you have the parts, but you have subsystems of those parts that are put together. Then you also have this machine operation view. So, like in a car, you got to convert oxygen and fuel to mechanical work. And then after you get done with that, you got to eject some of the waste products. So you've got that whole fuel system and all of the chemistry that is involved in that. And then you have control operation view. So like for instance, of the cars, like if you want to know how fast you're going, you got to collect and process the speed of the wheels. If you're turning, you have to know that as well because wheels have to turn at different rates when you're actually turning. First and like you need different things for like stability, like obviously a 4x4 truck is probably going to have better control and be more stable than just a two-wheeler, what am I trying to say? A two-speed or a two-wheel drive instead of a four-wheel drive. And then something that a lot of people forget is this whole idea of the manufacturing view. In other words, you got to convert all of the design drawings that the guys make, all the blueprints. You got to turn the blueprints. Then you got to take all those parts. You have to assemble them. You have to test them. And of course, if you're going to assemble something and you have, you're going to test it in terms of tolerance of, like really small pieces or really small gaps in between, say, a piston and stuff, then you've got to have a machine that's actually even more correct or more efficient than the actual thing you're designing. So you get the tolerances correct and stuff. So you can see this. If you have a car, it has all of these views involved in the design process. Now, a human body or any kind of critter for this matter, even a human cell, you could say this is, has the same kind of idea here. we've got, a whole human here, but of course that whole human is involved in several different types of parts. You've got, a heart, you've got lungs, you got kidneys, you got, muscles, you got eyeballs, you got all these different parts. And then, of course, you have, systems. So you got a circulatory system and a skeletal system and an excretory system. And you have control systems, your DNA, which controls all of this stuff. And those systems all kind of interact together. So just like the car, the human is also a complexity of all of these different views. So like you've got the torso, the head, the arms, the hands, the fingers, etc. for parts. You've got a systems view where you have a system, that a digestive system, a cardiovascular system, and all kinds of things that we just mentioned. You've got a machine operation view, so you've got to collect and distribute oxygen and glucose in your body. You got to convert oxygen and glucose into ATP, and there's lots of other systems here as well, getting rid of the oxygen out of or the CO2 out of your body and things like that. So you have this whole machine operation view, that's kind of the fuel part of it. And then you have these control things. You have to collect and process sensory information in your nerves, and you have to have instructions in order to have the chemical reactions that occur in your body, and all the enzymes and stuff that are used for that. And then, of course, there is kind of this whole overall manufacturing view. You have to take the genetic information that's in your body, and it acts like a blueprint, and it develops it has the overall view for your whole body. And then, you got to convert that genetic information, in other words, in order to live. So you've got all of these same really, really complex things that all go into, producing a human. And you could use these same things, you could say the same things about even individual cells. So obviously, when we talk about complexity in life, we're talking about similar types of things is what we would have with complex engineering things. So just like complex mechanical devices, living systems are extremely complex, and they're complex in multiple layers. And they also, because you have this genetic control and these genetic plans and information, it indicates a top-down or a planned design, suggesting that can evolve or arise just by chance. Now, the second thing we want to mention is these things called complex linkage mechanisms. Now, why are linking mechanisms important in engineering? Well, when you link up certain things, you can get complex functions or compact designs or fine tuning in engineering. Engineers know that these are what I've got pictured here are 4-bar systems, basically, and you have these different things hooked up together, and depending on your input and your output, you can get different things happening. Now, a 4-bar mechanism is irreducibly complex. And these are found in very complex designs in what people make in parts and business and engineering and things like that. You have to have all 4 bars in order for something to function. You can't have just one of them or 2 of them or even 3 of them. You have to have all 4, and they all have to be there at the same time. That's what we call irreducible complexity. An irreducibly complex system, if you remember from, I mentioned this in a previous video, a mousetrap is a great example of this. You have to have all these different parts for a mousetrap. You have to have the platform, you got to have the holding bar, you got to have the catch mechanism, you got to have a spring here, and that spring has to be hooked up to the hammer, and it all has to be hooked onto this platform. And of course, if you take any one of these pieces out of here, the mousetrap doesn't work. I mean, if you take away the catch here, then there's no triggering device. If you take away the spring, there's no way for the hammer to go. If you take away the platform, they're all just going to be laying on the floor and nothing's going to happen. It's an irreducibly complex system where you have to have all the parts present all at once. And of course, we've already talked about this in a previous video and talked about the fact that if you have an irreducibly complex system, you got to have everything at once, and that doesn't normally happen in nature. In fact, that usually causes mutations. Well, in a car system, we have several different kinds of linkage mechanisms, and they're four-bar mechanisms. Maybe you're not familiar with these, so let me just talk about a few of them here. Here's, you have what we call differential steering or differential turning in a car. It's hooked together with a four-bar system, and what happens is these four-bar systems are really important in order to do differential turning. What do I mean by that? Well, when you turn a car, if you're turning very sharply at all, the inside tire doesn't need to turn as fast as the outside tire because the outside tire has got to go farther around the pivot joint. And so what happens is this mechanism, this four-bar mechanism, allows it so you can have differential turning. One wheel can turn faster than the other. That's a very, very complex system, and it's a complex design. It's not easily found or easily designed. Now, not only that, in a car, there's also several other ones. Like, for instance, your car window. You have this rotary thing. It used to be we had hands that did it, but now we just have the battery turn up. But we have this rotary motor, and it's going around in circles. But the four-bar system allows it then to go up and down. So it goes from a rotary motion to a linear motion. Again, a very complex design. Your windshield wipers are similar. They start out with a rotary motor, but then they actually go to a rocking type of thing based on the way the four-bar system works. So it goes rocks back and forth from a rotary motion. And then again, car suspension, you go from linear to a rotation motion. So all of these are really, really complex things. These are not easily designed. And so they are, they optimize motion, they optimize force, and they optimize packaging. Well, what you may not know is that we find all these four-bar mechanisms all over nature, and this is the crux of Stewart's uh, uh, article that I referred to earlier. He goes through several of these, and I just want to share a few of them. Here's a parrotfish. Now, normally, like when we think of jaws closing, a lot of times we think of mammals or something like that. Like a mammal has a masseter, one on the top, muscle hooks up on the top here and on the bottom of the jaw, and it basically, it just goes back and forth, and it opens and closes, but it just opens and closes very simply. Now, I mean, I can bite down pretty hard on something, so obviously I can clamp down on something, but it's not nearly as efficient as this parrotfish. Notice the parrotfish has this four-bar mechanism here, and what happens is it has space behind the jaw. Instead of being like hooked right to the jaw, it has space behind the jaw. And so what happens is when these muscles pull on this thing, it closes this, and it has a much higher mechanical advantage. And so this thing can really clamp down on stuff really good and really hold on to it. And then when it opens, it can just use this little muscle to open it back up. Again, a four-bar irreducibly complex system just to open the jaw. Now, if that was the only fish, it wouldn't be so impressive, but there's all kinds of stuff like this in the ocean world. Here's the cheek-lined wrasse, and this one has two four-bar systems that are kind of connected together. And what happens is when it's closing, it uses, it's pulling on this thing to bring the thing closed, and it closes pretty hard and clamps down pretty good. But the interesting thing about this is when you pulls like this, it opens, and it opens so fast and so quick that it causes a suction. And so this allows suction to actually pull stuff into the mouth before it clamps down on it. Again, a really, really complex thing where they basically, just by opening it, it causes another thing to happen, this suction, which helps it feed. And lots of fish have that kind of system. Here's a dragonfish. Notice it's even more complex. It has the four things, but why is this so unique? Well, this one can open up so much. Instead of opening up just a little ways, it can open up so full that this thing can eat things that are much bigger than itself, or at least get them in its mouth and start to chew on it. Again, it's this four-bar design that is really, really complex and allows the dragonfish this unique way of eating. Now, unless you think these are all only found in exotic animals. Many of you may have fished for bass before. I love to fish. I like to fish for largemouth bass, and these have 4-bar systems as well. And part of it is for closing, and a part of it is for opening. Again, the same type of thing. This has a complex thing, and of course, as it opens, it will actually suck the stuff in as well. So these are all really, really complex systems. Um, you know, uh, if you try to make a remote fish in robotics, it's hard to get these systems that work as efficiently as these do in nature. Another joint is, or another this system that we see is the knee joint. And the knee joint is really, really an interesting system, and it has a 4-bar system. These are, let's see, it's tendons, I think it is, that go from one to the other, and or maybe it's ligaments, I forget. I can't remember now. Anyways, it's they are connecting like this, and of course, if you have one way, you can extend the leg, and then if you bend it another way, you can flex the leg. Now, what's interesting about this is it flexes one way, and then when you extend it, it extends the other way, but it only extends as far as where this kneecap is. The kneecap actually stops it from going any farther, so that you don't have chatter. What happens is when they first started trying to make legs on robots, if you try to make them, if you try to make the joint so that it's like just a regular joint where it can go both directions, what happens is it chatters. It doesn't, it will actually break down and won't work correctly. But this kneecap stops that chattering. Again, so you have this 4-bar system, but then you have another system, the kneecap, which keeps this so it only flexes and doesn't actually overextend. And of course, if any of you have ever overextended your leg, it can be really, really painful and actually cause some serious injury. Bird wing joints are really interesting. Here's a typical bird wing. Okay, notice it's similar to like humans and frogs and all stuff. They have a humerus, they got a radius and an ulna, that kind of stuff. There's phalanges. Okay, and so if you take a look at the joint and the linkages in it, they have this called what they call a pantograph mechanism. And what that basically does is that links the elbow and the wrist joint. So when they extend this, okay, with the tricep, when they pull together the tricep, it extends it, and this straightens out the wrist. But when they input or they use the biceps and pull it this way, then it actually bends the wrist. So you have a one motion connecting uh, uh, two different joints. Now, all of these are very, very complex things. They are not easy to make. In fact, people who are doing robotics are still wrestling with these, trying to make them nearly as efficient. And yet, in nature, they're just super efficient. The third thing that we want to mention is control systems. I'm only going to probably mention one here, okay? But living control systems are always more complex and they're always more efficient than mechanical systems. Now, the best example here, Robert Paterka has an article about this. What he did was he looked at control systems that controlled the balance of a robot. This is Asimo, the robot here, okay? And Asimo is made, I think it's by Honda, and it's taken them about 10 or 12 years to get them to really be able to stand up and walk very efficiently. Now they can go downstairs and stuff right now, but they still are not nearly as stable as a human. Now, what he did was he compared the systems for just staying upright, just being able to balance themselves. And this is the system for the robot, and this is the system for a human. Okay. Notice how many more more links and more um, paths that you have to know and then control in a human than in a robot. And this is just being able to stand upright. Okay. This isn't, running down the sidewalk or anything like that we can do that, most robots can't do yet. The systems are always, always much more complex than humans because there's so many more different inputs, especially you got the nerve systems and you have, just all kinds of different things. And just this one diagram is a great example how just in humans, just to stand up and to keep your balance, this is you get have all these different things in control compared to what a robot does. And the robot isn't nearly as good or nearly as efficient as the human. In other words, humans are really, really complex. Their system, their control system are really complex. Now, again, what are we trying to say with this? Well, we have we're talking about origins. And we're saying, well, what's the scientific data say? Does it say that the systems could be developing just by a mechanistic or a chance type of view, or do they look like they're designed? Well, if complex machines imply design, so like if you take our car systems and you say, well, yeah, that looks like it was designed, it couldn't have happened by chance, then biological systems, which are even more complex, and not only are they more complex, but they replicate on their own, they definitely suggest that there must be a designer behind them. And so this is another just a few examples of how when you look at nature and you look at the systems, it sure looks like scientifically, it sure looks like the system that or the model that is backed up is the intelligent design or the creation model. And I think that as we go on and we learn more and more and more about uh, design in animals and stuff, we're going to find that there's even more reason to believe that it is so much more complex than anything that could happen by chance.